for the first time virtually, Lee Goldberg, the author of Bone Canyon. Thank you, John, for the visual cue. The book has been getting great reviews. I know it just got an Associated Press review today, but I'm quoting Mystery and Suspense magazine. Lee Goldberg proves again he is a master storyteller with this piece. His inability to develop strong plots and use a fast-paced narrative keeps the reader on their toes as things progress. Poignant characters keep things enthralling till the final reveal for the attentive reader. We've had 3 great reads at Boswell. We are fans of the series. Lee Goldberg is a 2-time Edgar Award and 2-time Shamus Award nominee, and the author of the #1 best-selling author of many novels, has written and produced many TV shows, including Diagnosis, Murder, Sequest, and Monk, and the co-creator of the Mystery 101 series. As a television consultant, he has advised networks and studios all over the world. Tonight, we are honored to be having Goldberg in conversation with the great John Thornton, co-founder of Crimespree magazine, organizer of the Murder and Mayhem, Milwaukee, and served as host of BoxCon. Thank you both for making this a very special evening indeed. I turn things over to John, who will say hi and introduce.
This is my first Zoom, and it's kind of interesting because it's like I feel like I missed out all of 2020.
Okay, time to adjust that.
He sounds like a Star Trek character. I am the chronicler of doom, doom, doom. I'm God, Jim Kirk. He's just...
Well, and I wish I'd done this like right before the new year, because then I could have filled out my bingo card 2 ways. So the only downside to this whole thing is when we're done, we don't get to go have pizza.
That's the only reason I come to Milwaukee, for the pizza next door to Boswell's. But I am saving money because I always spend more money in Boswell's than I'm earning in royalties from the books I sell, which is not a good business plan.
Yeah, I've still got a stack next to my chair of books from my last visit over there.
Great.
So let's get into the new book. This is the second one with Eve. And this one starts off with wildfires and a body popping up.
Yes.
Now, is this something that actually happens?
Well, the wildfire happened. I haven't found a body in my backyard. But in Lost Hills, I'm not giving anything away by saying that there's a major wildfire in the book that blazes through the Santa Monica Mountains. It was fictional when I wrote it. Ironically, by the time I was proofing the galleys, an actual wildfire was blazing through the Santa Monica Mountains, and I had to evacuate my home. And I was sitting in Santa Clarita in my sister's house, watching flames licking the hillside where I live, and reading my description of the fire and realizing, hey, I got that right. No one's going to believe I made it up. They're going to think I got the idea from what really happened. But I did get the idea for Bone Canyon from the aftermath, which is after the Santa Monica Mountains were burned naked and it was all just black hills. All the brush had been destroyed. People came back to their homes, some people anyway, and found bones in their backyards. And that's because gang members in Los Angeles have been dumping bodies in the canyons for years, but the brush was holding all the bodies up and hiding all the bodies. So when all the brush burned away, the bones tumbled down into people's backyards. So some of these bones are years and years old, but other things were discovered. There was a woman who had Alzheimer's who wandered away from the county museum in downtown Los Angeles, and her body was found in the canyon. There was a couple who had disappeared on driving home from Los Angeles International Airport, and their car was found at the bottom of Santa Monica Canyon. They found plane wreckage. So it was just too good a setup not to take advantage of myself. And that's where Bone Canyon picks up.
When it almost sounds like something Kathy Wright should have picked up on, you would think.
Oh, she probably did. I haven't read all of Kathy's books, or watched all 700 episodes of Bones.
Yeah. Well, and the opening is cool. Now, in this book, she's still pretty new to the homicide detective thing. She's still trying to prove herself.
Yeah.
And it even feels like a little more so in this book. She's having to deal with people like don't want her there, and she has to prove herself more and more. How much work is it to make that animosity she's feeling realistic?
Oh, that's easy. That's easy. I would have a harder time writing a character that wasn't facing that kind of animosity or conflict. One of the things that makes this character so appealing to me as a writer, and I hope so compelling for people as readers, is that she isn't perfect, and her way is not smooth. There's obstacles all over the place, and even obstacles within herself. Because for those of you who didn't read Lost Hills, Eve Ronin is the youngest female homicide detective in Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. And she didn't get that job by virtue of experience or skill. She got it because when she was off duty, she saw this Hollywood star beating up his girlfriend, and she face planted him and arrested him. And it got out on viral media. You know, people all saw it on their phones, and she became a YouTube celebrity overnight, and she leveraged that popularity to get a promotion. So no one in the sheriff's department appreciates the fact that she's jumped all those rungs up to become a homicide detective at such a young age. And while she has some skills and she proved herself in the first book, people still within the department still resent her for jumping ahead. And she's also pretty cocky, and she's still dealing with her popularity. The fact that she was a YouTube sensation, and because of what happened in the first book, Hollywood is now sniffing around her. She's now not only having to battle animosity within her own department and having to prove herself to them and to herself, but now there's this mythical version of herself being created that she has to compete with. And that's a very LA thing, the awareness of television and popular culture for police officers doing their work here. So no, it gives me so much to write about that I wouldn't have if I were writing about yet another middle-aged white detective hero whose family was murdered by a serial killer, or they lost a testicle in the Vietnam War or whatever, and they're alcoholics. You know, I want to do something different that hasn't been done to death in the police procedural space.
Well, and it's interesting because your background in Hollywood kind of plays into a lot of this, and yet it doesn't overpower the book, which I enjoy, because I mean, I like talking to you about your Hollywood stuff and that whole thing, but it's like it doesn't overtake the book. One of the things I really enjoyed about the first book, and even more so in the second book, is her partner who kind of reluctantly becomes her mentor. I mean, he's a great character.
For those of you who didn't read Lost Hills, her partner is a guy who's only got a few weeks left on the force. He's the only one who would dare have her as a partner because he just doesn't give a damn anymore. He's on his way out the door. But of course, he's aware he's every cliche you've ever seen in a movie or TV show. The fat agent cop about to retire. He's got a target on his back. You know, he's doomed. And at first, I don't think he likes Eve very much, but comes to appreciate that she is raw talent that needs to be shaped. And he takes sort of a fatherly role in being her mentor, but he's as exasperated by her as everybody else is. And it's funny because I gave him a ticking clock. He's going to retire, I think it was in 3 months or something when I wrote the first book. And the response I got from readers to him was so enthusiastic. I hadn't planned on him being in book number 2. So book number 2 takes place just a week or so after book number 1. And my publisher's like, you know, he's really good. He should be back in book number 3. So book number 3 follows a couple of days after book number 2. And we'll have to see how things go after that. But I had anticipated, back before the pandemic, when I was doing a book tour for Lost Hills and I was meeting readers face to face and getting the feedback they had on the book, I realized that I may have made a mistake having this character retire.
Well, and that happened with Ed McBain. The end of the first 87th Precinct book, he killed him in character. And the agent and the publisher's like, yeah, maybe you should do something else with this guy.
What happened with Hill Street Blues?
Like 60-some books.
They killed Renko and I can't remember the name of the black officer. But the pilot, they were both gunned down, and that was supposed to be it. They weren't supposed to come back, but they did come back for the series. And you have to be open to that. You have to be open to the unexpected.
That's the beauty of fiction, though. I mean, you're in control of the world. I mean, Ian Rankin said that when he first started writing Rebus, he tried to do it in real time. And eventually, he realized he was going to keep writing his books, but Rebus is supposed to retire.
Right.
And I mean, Michael Conley, I think, kind of ran into the same thing. So I kind of, not going to give anything away. At the end of the book, I love the scene with the two of them. And I'm not going to say anything else about it.
One thing
about I love the way you handled that scene and what you did with it.
Thank you. The one thing that's nice about having these books, at least for now, take place within a week or so of each other is I'm not moving through time very fast. And I don't want her to mature too fast. In my mind, if I'm lucky enough to do a whole series of these books, she will get to the point where she's Harry Bosch, where she has that experience and that confidence. But I'm not there yet. She's in her mid-20s. She's inexperienced. There's a long way to go before she has that kind of confidence or has acquired that kind of respect within law enforcement. And she makes some huge mistakes in Lost Hills. She makes some very big mistakes in Bone Canyon. She makes some big mistakes in the book coming up this fall. And that's appealing to me. I just don't want her to get to proficiency too fast. And I want to see her evolve. But each book stands alone. You can read Bone Canyon without having read Lost Hills. I'm tired of books where it feels as if you have to read the first 20 to read book 21. Who wants to make that kind of commitment to a book series?
And you don't like overly explain what happened in the first book. There's just enough to there to get you into the book.
I hate info dumps.
They both stand alone well.
Thank you.
What I also enjoy in this one is because she's still learning the ropes. She's clever, she's smart, but she's gaining the skills.
Yeah.
So she's dealing with a lot of politics within the department and their overlap with other departments. And I mean, I don't know enough cops to really know, but I would imagine once you start working your way up in these institutions, there's a lot of politics.
Oh, yeah. And my character likes to pretend, Eve Ronin likes to pretend that she's not playing politics. She is. She likes to pretend that she's not a media whore. She is. She likes to pretend that she's not manipulating her popularity in the media to get what she wants in the department. But she is. So I also like a character who is in some ways not being honest with herself. Again, gives me more to play. I want as much conflict in every scene as I can possibly get. I don't want to get complacent with the character and just have it be another police procedural where the mystery is driving the story. I want the character driving the story. I firmly believe that what readers remember is not so much the mystery, but the character moments. They come back for the character, not for the mystery. Though if you do a crappy mystery, they won't come back again. You got to keep the mystery engaging and interesting. And that's a challenge because you're trying to tell a story, but also create a puzzle at the same time. And be honest, at least I try to be honest, to have all the clues right there so you can go back after you finish the book and see what you missed, if you missed them. I just read a terrific book by Anthony Horowitz, and I knew who done it. And I still love the book because it made me feel smart. Oh, I caught that clue. But it may also be because I'm aware of the magic trick that goes into writing a whodunit, where you want them to look over here when the clue's over here. The misdirection that goes into writing a mystery.
Well, and I found that over the years, I mean, I've watched so many crime shows and movies and read so many of these books. I'm not going to get fooled all that often. And the character is what drives it for me now. I mean, I can read a book or watch a show or movie where the plot is kind of weak. As long as it's done well, I don't have to be surprised. But it's the characters that keep me coming back. I mean, I can't tell you how many books, I mean, a lot of books I've read where had it been a different character that I wasn't familiar with, I might have stopped reading the book. But I like the characters enough to come back. And what's nice about Eve is even though she's screwing up, she learns from her mistakes. And it's like every little thing she's picking up and learning, be it the politics, investigating skills, what to hide from people and what not, just talking to people. It's like her arsenal keeps getting bigger. It's like she's got an empty utility belt when this whole thing starts. And a little bit further, she's filling up that belt.
I'm wearing a utility belt now. I've got bat shark repellent here. I've got all kinds of cool stuff on my utility belt.
See, and the beautiful thing about this is nobody can tell whether or not I'm wearing pants.
Yes.
So I guess there is one advantage to this format.
It's like I've said, these are like dinner parties, except without the pants or food or good drinks. I mean, I've got some Diet Coke here, but that's the width of it.
All right, so we covered the politics. Now, I also noticed that in this issue, there's been trust issues because people in the department don't necessarily want to work with her. And she's navigating who she can trust and who she can't. And I mean, I suppose with like life, people, the higher they are up in an authority position, the more you assume you should be able to trust them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as imagine as a cop, like you would just assume your captain would be trustworthy. And I'm enjoying watching her navigate, knowing how much she should say and not give too much away. And I think that's an experience that people deal with in real life. I mean, dealing with Hollywood stuff, I would imagine there's parallels to that.
Oh, you
You
can
sit down
trust
with the money
everybody in
guys,
Hollywood. What are
you
you
don't want to
talking
explain
about?
to them, we're
Everybody
going
in
to spend
Hollywood is
$500,000
sincere.
blowing up this bus. You just got to do it.
It's don't get me started on insincerity in Hollywood and who you can trust. I've got so many scars in my back. I mean, come on, I worked with David Hasselhoff, Sammo Hung. I've been stabbed in the back by the best of them, or the worst, depending on how you look at it. At least when I did the New Adventures of Flipper, I never had to worry about the dolphins stabbing me in the back.
We have a question that came in. Somebody says that they were impressed with how Bill Kreider could obscure killers. Now, you've actually, in everything I've read with yours, you are very clever with the little red herrings.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I can tell it's like, you're obviously saying, well, this guy feels creepy enough, he's got to be the killer. So I don't necessarily buy into every little trick, but you do a very good job of keeping it kind of close to the vest until the end of the book.
Well, thank you. I've had a lot of experience writing mysteries. I wrote and produced, well, I didn't write every single one of them, but I was the executive producer of Diagnosis Murder for 100 episodes. And every episode, I wrote 34 or 35 of them, but every episode went through my computer. And when you have to do 22 to 24 episodes a season, you have to find a lot of ways of doing a whodunit, a lot of different kinds of misdirection, because if someone's watching you every week, they begin to learn your tricks. So sometimes I'll make someone seem like a red herring, and then it's him. You know, it's or the murder is an impossible murder because it is actually impossible. So you have to go back and start from that point. Or I mean, I tried every Diagnosis Murder was a great learning experience for me because I tried every permutation of a mystery I could think of, every trick, every illusion, every distraction, and I saw what worked and what didn't, and I now try to use that in my book writing. It's harder, I think, to do that misdirection on a page because it's all right there for the reader to see, and it's easier to do with editing and directing the point of view in a TV show than it is in a book. And I marvel at Agatha Christie, and Anthony Horowitz is doing the best whodunits out there now. And even like I said, even when I can figure it out, I still admire the construction. And that's a challenge. But I never let the mystery. And I did 15 Monk novels, and those had to be impossible crimes that only Monk could solve. In that case, I didn't want the reader to be able to solve it, so that was really hard to. But also, I wanted to be honest. I never bring a clue in that the reader hasn't seen already, or I don't have people go off like a Nero Wolfe. While you were away, Archie, I sent Saul Panzer down to Argentina, and look what he found. I don't do that. So it's a challenge, but I don't get so wrapped up in the mystery that I forget that the key is character. And I've had great mysteries that I haven't used because I don't think they reveal enough about the central character, that it becomes too much about the plot. And it needs to be more about how the detective is finding their way through the mystery than about the mystery itself.
Now, do you ever come up with something that is just so clever you surprise yourself? Like you come up with like some kind of cool twist?
Oh, yeah.
Given the breadth of how much you've written in the genre, I mean, I would imagine there's still times you kind of, whoa, why didn't I think of that 20 years ago?
I am still very, very happy with 2 medical mysteries I did. Actually, I'm very happy with a lot of my Monk mysteries, which are more whodunits than obviously my Eve Ronin police procedurals. But I did a Diagnosis Murder where a guy used his own kidney as a murder weapon. That was a great deal of fun. And I got that idea, and I don't know if I've told this story to you before, but the research I did was unusual. I had a bad accident a few years ago and broke both of my arms, one of them severely. and had to have 3 plates, 16 screws, and a titanium radial head put in my right arm. In fact, that experience plays a part in Bone Canyon. But after a year with all that stuff in my arm wasn't moving. So it was determined by the surgeons that I needed to take all that stuff out of my arm. So I go in for surgery, and the surgeon said, "Would you like to be awake for the surgery?" I said, "Wouldn't that hurt like hell?" And he went, "Oh, no, we'll numb that side of your body. You'll be fine. And I just thought you might be interested." Okay. "But if you don't like it, we can put you out right away. So don't worry about it." All right. And usually I get, nauseous watching an underarm deodorant commercial, but somehow when I was having the operation, they gave me the shot, they put this curtain between me and my arm, and they opened my arm up, and they were taking all this metal out, and I had a mirror, and I was able to look at the surgeon. I saw my naked bone there and all that, and I was fine. I wasn't nauseous at all. That's because I had so many drugs being pumped into me. But I was sitting there with the mirror, looking at my open arm, and I said to the surgeon, "While I've got you here, I'm writing a diagnosis murder where I want to make the kidney the murder weapon, that this guy is, donated his kidney. I want that to be the murder weapon. How can I do that?" And so we had this whole discussion, and the surgeon said it was the most unusual surgical experience of his entire career. He had never plotted a murder while taking the metal out of the titanium out of a guy's arm. I did try to write that whole operation off on my taxes as research, but I wasn't able to make that fly. But again, it's interesting how that accident ended up informing actually several books. I've used things I learned from that experience, again, as recently as Bone Canyon. Implants play a role in the story.
That's actually really hard-boiled.
Yeah, that's hard-boiled. To investigate this, to plot this story, I broke my arms.
But I mean, that's probably one of the more hard-boiled things I've actually heard. I mean, while you can actually see into your arm, ligaments and all that stuff going on, you're plotting a book.
Well, as long as I'm here, might as well get some work done. I had the writing to do anyway. I had a deadline, which was difficult to meet as it was.
So it might have been a good time to bring somebody to transcribe it while you were in surgery.
Yeah.
And, one of the other things that kind of pops up in this book is she's getting people interested in her story, and she's got an agent.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of stuff kind of throughout the book with that. Now, how realistic is that? I mean, do people actually look to law enforcement and kind of approach them about things like this?
Oh, sure. There's a big murder case. You can expect the investigators, even the reporters covering the case, to have their stories optioned and Hollywood to come calling. Oh no, that's common. That's very realistic, that aspect of the story. And also the whole process of how a story is optioned and how intense that whole experience can be.
Well, because I mean, I've seen a lot of shows, they've got technical advisors who are all former law enforcement. And I've met a few people who do that. But it added another interesting kind of dimension to the story, I thought. Because
there's an aspect of Los Angeles. I mean, in a way, all my books are the same. I'm always exploring the conflict between fiction and reality, and how we try to live up to the fiction, how people expect us to live up to the fiction, and that whole world interests me. And I think it does because of where I live. I mean, I live in Los Angeles, where dreams are made, where all the movies and TV shows are produced, and they're all shot here, or a vast majority of them are shot here. And they're not just shot on the back lots. All of the streets of LA are a stage. There's virtually no street that I can drive down that I haven't seen in a TV show. So we are all part of the make-believe world that the world is consuming. And it's hard not to be influenced by that and be aware of it. But on top of that, everybody's carrying a camera. Everyone is able to turn reality into entertainment programming just by aiming there. I mean, look, yesterday, the insurrection in DC, how many people were filming it? It was amazing. There's all those cameras there. So I don't think it's possible to be in Los Angeles and not be constantly aware of television and film. But it's particularly true of the Lost Hills Station of Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, because the Lost Hills Station is, the jurisdiction is Malibu, Hidden Hills, Santa Monica. It's where Calabasas, it's where all the celebrities and studio chiefs and agents are living. The Kardashians are here. Everybody's here. Justin Bieber's here. So it's impossible not to have it. I mean, think of all the big stories that have come out of Lost Hills, the Mel Gibson anti-Semitic rant. Just recently, the helicopter crash. It's just, there's so much going on here.
Well, I think that might be part of the reason. I mean, my two favorite cities for books and things to take place in are New York and LA. And I was in LA in 1990, way before I started the magazine, did any reviewing, anything like that. And I mean, I had been reading mysteries at that point, and I definitely need to come back now that I've got all these other books in my head and all the shows in my head, and I actually know people involved in various parts of this. Because even just that first visit, it's like you go to lunch and the waiter's like, hey, I just did a commercial for so-and-so. I mean, everybody has got, within one or two people of them are tied into this somewhere.
I guarantee you, if you walk into a restaurant and you mention you're a TV producer, you could leave with a stack of headshots and scripts from all the people who are working at the restaurant. Everybody here has a connection to Hollywood. But to be fair, it's an industry town. The same thing would be true if you're in Longview, Washington. Everybody's in the logging business. If you were in Detroit, everyone's in automotive industry. It's true of any company town. That's not unique to Los Angeles. And it's also true, when aerospace was big here in the San Fernando Valley, a lot of people had some interaction with Northrop or whatever. So it's just another industry. So you see actors here all the time, particularly where I live, at the grocery store, the drugstore, and no one bothers them. No one. And it's funny, you'll see, not recently, but I remember once Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt were in my grocery store with their kids, and no one was bothering them because they were just another tired, irritated couple with screaming kids. They didn't look like movie stars. They looked like everybody else. And everyone respected their privacy. And, their grocery cart was filled with the same stuff your grocery cart would be filled with. It's just a job here. And so many people have connections to that world here that unless you're paparazzi or a tourist, it's no big deal to see a famous movie star at your Ralph's supermarket or at your CVS pharmacy or in the movie theater. It's just the way life is here. And just, even my own life. I mean, I'm a writer, producer in television. My brother-in-law is a grip, meaning he moves the lights around and the sets around. It's just, everyone's got some connection to Hollywood.
When I was there in 1990, my cousin was living in a fourplex, and a woman across the hall had a small recurring role on Days of Our Lives. And I didn't recognize her. I hadn't watched the show in a while. But we chatted a few times. She set us up with dinner reservations at this place. Got to know her a little bit over the week we were there. About a year and a half later, on an episode of ER, she's walking down the hallway wearing a gown with her butt showing. And I think it might have been the first bare ass on television. And it really freaked me out because I'm like, I met her. It was really weird.
I know that ass. Yeah, I remember my first big celebrity sighting when I came down to Los Angeles to go to school at UCLA. I went to a theater that's no longer here, the Plit in Century City, to see Once Upon a Time in America. And I'm standing at the refreshment stand getting my popcorn and Diet Coke, and I realized that the old man standing next to me was Sean Connery. And he was in one of those gym suits that has the racing stripe down the arm and it matches the racing stripe down the leg. And as you can probably tell just from looking at this video, I'm a big James Bond fan. I have these Bond posters behind me, which I swap out every week for different ones. And it's like, oh my God, Sean Connery standing right next to me. I could barely move. I just, oh my God, how do I breathe? What do I do? And he looked like anybody else, and I go in the theater and I sit down and he sits right behind me with his wife. And I'm like, oh my God, Sean Connery's looking at the back of my head. This is such an honor. And it was just a thrill that Sean Connery's up behind. I didn't know how to sit. Didn't even know how to eat my popcorn. How do I watch a movie with Sean Connery behind me? The movie starts and I get into the movie, and Sean Connery's wife won't stop talking. And I'm beginning to get less and less enamored of Sean Connery and more irritated at his wife. And I was actually about to turn around and tell Sean Connery's wife, could you please be quiet? And just as I'm turning around to talk to her, Sean Connery turns to her and says, Martine, would you please shut the fuck up? I can hear you anytime. I want to hear Jimmy Woods. And I started laughing. Oh my God, they're just like us. I mean, they're no different. And from that moment on, honest to God, I was never intimidated by an actor again. And that has served me so well in what was my professional life at the time. I put myself through college interviewing celebrities for Starlog Magazine, United Press International, Los Angeles Times Syndicate, and, American Film, a whole bunch. And then, in my career as a TV producer, where I was dealing with a lot of big celebrities, I never, ever got nervous, never got uncomfortable. It allowed me to be honest in my interactions with them. And I owe that to Sean Connery because, it was so normal. Just please shut the fuck up. I want to hear Jimmy Woods. And then in a way, later on, for my daughter growing up, seeing celebrities at the grocery store, Jessica Simpson standing in line looking at the article about herself in the National Enquirer or whatever. My daughter is totally not wowed by celebrities as well, because you see them all the time I remember this, my daughter was, I don't know, 10 years old or something, and we went to the wrap party for Monk, and my daughter really liked Monk, and my daughter goes up to Tony Shalhoub and says, Tony, Maddie Goldberg. She shakes his hand. I really enjoy your work. he just laughed because she was so easygoing and everything, and he invited her to hang out with his kids who were there too, and she said fine, and she did, but she was just so straightforward and adult. Tony, I really enjoy your work.
I have, over the years, I've met so many different authors and people like that, and it's still, I forget sometimes. Like at my first BoucherCon, I remember meeting a couple authors I'd been reading for years, and I've been going to them now for over 20 years, so I forget sometimes that, it's always somebody's first convention. Mm-hmm. You get that person who's like, holy crap, is that so-and-so? I'm like, oh, yeah. But every now and then I meet somebody and I turn into a fanboy like I've never met anybody. Do you still ever occasionally have one of those experiences?
I do occasionally. There was a time a few years ago at the LA Times Festival of Books where my brother Todd and I and Denise Hamilton encountered Donald Westlake, who was getting a big award. And we just went up to say hello. We're big fans. He ended up chatting with the three of us for about 2 hours. And I just remember me and Todd and Denise Hamilton just sharing silent looks of, holy crap, we're sitting here chatting with Donald Westlake. And I have those moments. And I still have them with old friends of mine. I've now known Lawrence Block for 25 years. But there are still moments where I'll be at a restaurant and we'll be having dinner together and it will hit me, God, I wish I could go back to when I was 10 years old, 12 years old and tell that kid, not only are you going to be, know Lawrence Block, you're going to be friends with him. And you're going to go out to dinner together every time you're at a conference. And I just wouldn't have believed it. So I love meeting writers that I like. I've never met Anthony Horowitz, but I would love to meet him. And I'm sure I'd be very excited to meet him, but I wouldn't be fanboyish. I'd be appreciative to have the opportunity and to talk shop and whatnot. I'm very fortunate that I can look at the New York Times bestseller list and realize, oh my God, I know so many of these people. I can pick up the phone and call them. Again, if you told me that when I was a kid, I wouldn't have believed it. And one of the great things about at least the mystery writing community is 99% of the authors are so nice, so approachable, so down to earth, whether you're me or anybody else. I remember the first conference I went to, first BoucherCon, and I never had a book published. I had a galley in my bag I was supposed to get blurbs for, and the authors treated me so nicely. There was a table, and Elmore Leonard was sitting there with Tom Kokonis, George Chesbrough, Warren Murphy. I can't remember all the others who were there, but I was like off to one side, eavesdropping, not subtly at all. I was just clearly listening to everything. And I can't remember whether it was Elmore Leonard or somebody who said, hey, why don't you join us? Oh, no, it's okay. Well, there's an empty chair right here. Why don't you join us? And I couldn't believe that they invited me into the conversation and gave a damn. And I think that the next conference I attended may have been a Left Coast Crime. And same thing, in the bar, I was listening to Michael Connelly, Robert Crace, Gar Anthony Haywood, and T. Jefferson Parker talking about book tours and stuff. And again, I was eavesdropping with all the subtlety of a neutron bomb. And they invited me to sit with them. And that hasn't changed. I mean, we all know, we won't mention names, but there are a couple assholes in the mystery field who are a little too full of themselves. I'm probably one of them, but most of them are just so nice, so approachable, glad to help you any way they can, glad to answer any questions, glad to take a selfie. It's great. I love being part of that community, and I don't have the fanboy moments, but I do appreciate how lucky I am to be able to meet so many of the people I admire.
Well, that's one thing about every author pretty much I've ever met. I feel lucky to have been able to meet them, just let them know I appreciate their work. And it's kind of funny, one of the very first authors I ever met at a signing was Larry Block. And the first time I met him, he was really quiet. Turns out his mother had just passed the week before. Second time I met him, he was full-blown Larry, gregarious, very outgoing. And it's funny that you mentioned him, because last night, probably like a lot of people in this country, I was watching CNN all night. And I was up, I didn't go to sleep until 11:30 this morning. Took about a 2-hour nap, but I'm tweeting the whole time while I'm watching all this ridiculous, crazy shit. And boop, Larry Block was responding to me on Twitter. And I've met Larry the first time like 24 years ago, and I'm still like, oh my God, Larry tweeted at me.
Well, I've met some rude authors, and I'm probably going to break the heart of Jerry Saylor, who I see is joining us here, watching us at our big Robert B. Parker fan. He was one of the rudest people I've ever met. I couldn't believe it. I remember, I think it was Boulder or Scottsdale. He was a guest of honor, and people had come to a signing, and I was signing nearby. And he was talking to his publicist, like this. And people hand the books, and he'd sign them like a machine, not looking at these people. And I mean, there was one woman who was a huge fan. She was so nervous. I'm your biggest fan. I've got all your books. And just signed them by rote. And I remember the first time I met him was then, and I mentioned that I was a writer on Spencer for Hire, and he said, "Yeah, that show's terrible." Gee, thank you. And I couldn't believe that. And by the same token, I saw Nevada Bar at a signing, and actually, I'll make it a more recent example. I wrote 5 books with Jan Ivanovich, and we went to signings where there were, no exaggeration, 700 people waiting. 700. She made a point of connecting personally with every single one of those people. She introduced herself. She listened to what they had to say. She found some way to connect with them by either talking about, who's your favorite character? I love your blouse. Where can I get a blouse like that? She made sure every one of them had a picture taken with her. She would sign anything she wanted. Every one of them left with a smile on their face. And she made it clear to all of them, don't worry, I am not leaving until every one of you not only gets a signed book, but anything else you want signed. And if you want your picture taken, if you don't have a camera, my guy will take a picture for you and email it to you. She was wonderful. And I never forgot how rude Robert Parker was. And he didn't need to.
When you met him, was he still drinking?
I don't know, but years later, he was the grandmaster at the Edgars, and I was on the committee at the time. And when I met him there in that situation, he was very talkative and charming and funny. And I didn't remind him that he had blown me off and was rude to me back when we were doing Spencer for Hire. But that's one of the rare examples of somebody that I've encountered who's been rude, not just to other authors, but also to readers. Because if someone's devoted that much time to you and collected all your books, give them your full attention. Don't. You can talk to your publicist later. Talk to the reader. Make the reader. I've got
to come up with a 3-strike rule, because I have met a few authors, and the first time I met them, they're kind of not necessarily blowing me off, but obviously they had better things to do. And over the years, I've kind of discovered that sometimes they're actually maybe in a conversation with an agent or something's going on. But it could also be. I've had authors where every experience is awful. I wasn't at the store the time it happened, but Parker was one of the very first signings at the mystery store that was here in Milwaukee. Richard got him a bucket with a 12-pack of cold local beer. He got in the car afterwards and drove up to Madison. And apparently, halfway there, he had the driver stop and get more beer. So by the time he got there, he was just shit-faced.
Like James Crumley. I went to a signing where he couldn't sign books. He was so drunk.
Yeah. Well, and then, you know, in following years, I met Parker, I think 3 times. Pretty nice the first 2 times. The last time, about a year before he passed, I was the only guy there, and there was like 27 women. And he was the most charming. I couldn't believe it was the same guy. I mean, a woman's like, where did you get your shoes? Led to a 20-minute story about him shopping for shoes, and no questions about his books, all stuff about what he wears.
But those can be the best conversations, because I think some readers want to get to know the person behind the books. So if you're talking about something besides the books, talking about marriage or kids or shoes or hamburgers or whatever, it humanizes you. It reminds you feel like I had a genuine conversation with Lee Child. We didn't talk about books. We talked about politics, or we talked about, you know, whatever.
Right.
And I think that's good. And I think the authors appreciate that. I remember I did a movie. I wrote and produced a movie in Berlin. And we had a day of shooting. And one of the actors in the show was a big star in Germany. And afterward, we all went to this bar that he knew. And we got there. He was treated very well. But then a guy came in who was like the Brad Pitt of Germany. And everyone went freaking nuts over this guy. And he was a good friend of the actor that I had come in with. And we ended up having to go to a private room just to so this guy could have some privacy. And I ended up talking to the Brad Pitt of Germany for most of the evening. But we talked about nothing about the industry. It was all about kids, and I don't even remember what it was all about. But at the end of the evening, he said, I just want to thank you for this conversation. I said, why? He says, well, you treat me like a person. I said, you are a person. And he said, no, but you treat me like I wasn't a movie star. And I said, I'll be honest with you. I don't know who the hell you are. I mean, I know you're a big star here in Germany, but I'm not intimidated by you because I've never seen you before. So you are just a nice guy to me. Maybe it'd be different if you were Mel Gibson, but but it's the same sort of thing. I think even some authors who are always being, people are kissing up to them to get a blurb or some other thing. They appreciate being treated like a person and not as a commodity. But also I give people the benefit of the doubt. A lot of these authors are on book tours and they're going to a different city literally every day. So they're jet lagged, they're exhausted, they've been answering the same question time and time again.
Well, and you get to what's called the shtick.
Yeah.
So what's the new book about? Boop, and it starts off on the thing. I mean, there's some authors I saw enough times, the store would be packed. So I'd let the people who hadn't seen them before enjoy the part. I'd go out and have a smoke, chat with a friend. And then when they started answering questions and I get to the new stuff after the shtick, then I'd come back in.
So you've interviewed me now, what, 3 times at Boswell's?
3 times at Boswell, and I think at least twice in print.
Okay. So do you now feel I'm telling the same stories every single time we get together? Do you now feel like my wife, that I've got 2 stories that I just keep telling?
The only one I've actually heard repeated was the one about the broken arms.
That's a hard one not to repeat.
Tighter version. Though I was talking to a friend of mine earlier who I sent home with 2 copies of 2 of your books. And I told him what I was doing tonight. And I explained that you worked on Diagnosis Murder.
Yeah.
And I told him the story about your daughter meeting Dick Van Dyke.
Yeah. Now I tell that story a lot. A lot of people ask that.
Favorite stories. So I mean,
speaking of questions, do any of the folks who are tuning in right now have questions that John wasn't smart enough to ask that I haven't answered 1,000 times? I could do not by rote, but that might actually make me break into tears and burrow into the dark center of my soul?
Well, actually, I think I've hit the high points on the book. I mean, the trick with this is I don't want to give too much away.
Yeah.
Because I'm guessing most people haven't read it.
Don't mention she's dead and that she's a ghost in the book. Oh, shit.
Well, and the scene with the
sometimes
monkeys,
I lose control and
the monkeys was awesome. Yeah, and it's interesting though, because at the beginning of the book, it almost felt like a cold case, because obviously this was a murder that had happened a long time ago. Mm-hmm. Does that give you the chance to not necessarily do a flashback, but I think with a lot of mysteries set in the last 10, 15 years, you lose some of the appeal of earlier mysteries where they couldn't just pick out their cell phone and look everything up. And by having her work on an older mystery, it kind of takes away some of that newer advantage.
The danger, though, is you lose some of the immediacy when you're dealing with something that happened in the past. Because you're always saying, where were you? What were you doing? And there's not the sense of urgency of a ticking clock of something happening now.
Right.
So that's one reason why, yes, she's dealing with a cold case without giving anything away. It has an urgent current aspect to it. It opens up a new door. I really hate doing murder mysteries where you find a body and then you spend an hour of television time or 400 pages of book going, where were you on June 17th? And you're stuck dealing with something that had a beginning, middle, and end in the past and really doesn't have any currency today at this moment. So you don't have the narrative engine driving your story forward, which is why most murder mysteries tend to have a second murder, just to keep things, going, to say there's an ongoing threat, that there's still a current thread that needs to be followed, that whatever caused that first murder isn't over yet. And I think that's very important. You want to keep that forward motion. You want to keep that energy. You want to keep that momentum. You want to keep the reader moving through the pages, and that's hard to do if you're mired in yesterday. And that's part of my problem with a lot of British mysteries. A lot of detective chief inspectors are roaming around the English countryside talking about murders that happened, days ago, or just a murder that happened yesterday, and it's so boring. It's all exposition and interviews and discussing the interviews you just had. I like more of a unfolding. I think that's in many ways what the Spencer novels are, and the Spencer TV show, and to some degree what my Eve Ronin books are. They aren't whodunits, so there's a whodunit aspect. They are unfoldings. You're watching things happen, and the detective kind of running alongside it, trying to figure out what exactly is happening, and trying to see the full picture. It's like running alongside a moving car and only seeing part of the hubcap. You want to see the whole car and who's driving it, and trying to figure out where it's going. That's a terrible metaphor. God, I do this for a living, and that's the best I can come up with. Don't buy my books. I'm clearly a miserable hack. There's more of that garbage in the book I just wrote. I'm joking. I'm not a miserable hack. I'm a fraud, but not a miserable hack.
Now, a question popped up. You've got a Wisconsin tie to a group of actual police officers and stuff that you're associated with.
Yes.
How many times have you? What's the event, and how many times have you been to it?
I've been to a few things in Wisconsin. I went to the Writers Police Academy, which is, I highly recommend to anybody who writes mystery novels. And it gives sort of a police officer's training to writers. And it's held in different places around the country, but for 3 straight years, it was held at a training facility in Green Bay. And in fact, the next one will be held there as well. And it's great. And you get to drive police cars and learn pit maneuvers, fire guns, analyze blood evidence. It's terrific. While I was there, I befriended the people who run the law enforcement training facility that the police academy, Writers Police Academy, is held at. And they said to me, you would love a homicide investigators training conference for professional homicide detectives. I said, yes, I would, but you don't allow civilians into them. He said, well, we run it. We can let in anybody we want. And they invited me to go to a homicide investigators training conference. It's training seminar. And what that is to be a homicide detective, you have to recertify to a degree. You every year you have to take 24 hours of educational classes to stay up to date on current laws and investigative techniques and to keep yourself sharp. And all homicide detectives loathe it. It's just a terrible experience. And you have to sit in a hotel listening to boring stuff instead of being on the street. But I got invited to this, and it was clear from day one that I wasn't a cop. I walk in for breakfast and it's like a bad day at a new school. The cops are all either carrying guns and badges or carrying the weight of them physically. You could all tell they were cops. And then there was, hi! I come in and I'm clearly not a homicide detective. No one wanted to be near me. I was radioactive. They didn't know who the hell I was, but they didn't want to be near me. So there's a case presented, a case that proved why you have to approach every homicide as if you've never approached a homicide before. That you shouldn't make any assumptions based on past experience. I won't get into any details about it, but the detective who investigated this particular case was there presenting it. The blood spatter experts, the uniformed officers, the prosecuting attorney, everybody who was involved in that case was there. They were showing all the photos. And And I asked tons of questions. I was in the dark, so nobody could see me, you know. So I asked a ton of questions. And then at the lunch break, I went up to the lead detective that was presenting the case, and I asked him more questions. And he said, yeah, you ask great questions. May I ask what agency you're with? I said, yeah, I'm a senior investigator with the WGA. And he said, I'm not familiar with that agency. I said, Writers Guild of America. And he said, you're a fucking writer? How the fuck did you get in here? He was like really upset. And I pointed to the guy who ran the conference. I said, he invited me. And the guy looked at him, and the guy running the conference goes, so the detective said, well, if he likes you, I like you. Good questions, keep it up. But after all the cops saw me talking to this guy and sort of being accepted, then I was the cool guy. And then that night, I wisely at the bar bought drinks for every single cop. And once they learned I was from Hollywood and I was buying drinks, suddenly they loved me. Suddenly they're all telling me their stories. But I ended up writing about that case, and it became my novel, Lost Hills. And I've been back again to that homicide investigators training conference. And although I didn't learn about a case there that directly inspired Bone Canyon, I did meet forensic anthropologists and other experts there who were greatly helpful to me in the writing of that book. And I picked up details, investigative things, little details that allow me to ground my books in reality, or at least a reality where you go, well, this sounds true, so that I can completely lie and mislead you through the rest of the book. Because my books aren't real, they're fiction, and I make stuff up, and I play with procedure and what have you. But as long as I can give you that one detail that makes you think wrongly that I know what the hell I'm talking about, you'll be along for the rest of it. And in fact, I just got invited to that conference again in April. I'm hoping the pandemic will be over and I won't be risking my life to go to it.
Now, you've met a lot of law enforcement. Have you met any bad guys? Have you actually had an opportunity to meet people who've been jailed or should have been jailed?
I had an opportunity at one of these homicide investigator training conferences to meet serial killers. There was an FBI behaviorist who wanted to introduce homicide detectives to serial killers so they could have the experience of meeting one face to face and knowing what they were like. So we had these Zoom interviews with jailed serial killers, and some of them were like, none of them were Hannibal Lecter, but some were clearly scary, evil people, and others were so shockingly normal. And yet you find out, you have the whole case file in front of you, the horrific things they did. It was great. It was wonderful to meet these and be able to actually talk to these serial killers about their killings and what they did, and how some of them dissembled and tried to still even convince you they didn't do these killings. And it was really great. And so you had the FBI behaviorist explain to us who we were going to meet and some of the techniques they would try to use to win us over or scare us or whatever, or some of the tells. And then we spent 2 hours talking to these serial killers one after another. And then we had like a debriefing afterward. And it was fantastic. Now, I don't know how that will help me in my writing. It probably already has. It's probably already seeped in to what I'm doing without me being aware of it.
Well, and it's funny because there's just so much serial killer stuff out there. We as Americans love it, find it highly entertaining. And I imagine we're not alone. And there's certain, it feels like tropes. Oh, he was a quiet guy next door. Everybody liked him. Mindhunter kind of played that up even more.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much that was based on fact or not. But it also seemed like there's certain criminals in general, I think, like to try to shock people and freak them out. Almost like they're doing their own version of Scared Straight.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, I don't see how that could not help into your writing. And I mean, they say, get into the mind of the killer. And I think I've known you long enough that I don't see you being able to get enough into the mind of the killer where it would be a homicidal
You know
problem.
so little about me. You have no idea what's behind that closet door. I have a dark soul, John. I come across as the jovial, fat, middle-aged Jewish guy, but inside I'm seething with violence and pornography. I'm a terror. You think you know me, but there's that time I used to eat Doritos without stopping. I've used profanity.
I had a conversation with Barb D'Amato at a conference years ago, and I'd known Barb a while, and I forgot that there are aspects of my life and her life we haven't necessarily shared. We were walking across the street over to where the conference was. And I mentioned something about how back in the early 80s, one weekend, I was really coked up and doing this thing. And she just stopped in her tracks. And I'm like, I've been clean and sober at this point for years. But it's just like, it threw her. And she's like, I forget people had lives outside of this.
I remember there's an author named Barbara Saranella who wrote some great books. And I was on a panel with her and Kelly Lang. And Kelly Lang was a Los Angeles anchor woman who wrote really horrible mysteries.
Horrible
Mysteries. And she was moderating. And she turned to Barbara and she said, Barbara, when you were a crack whore giving blowjobs in alleys, did you ever think you'd be a mystery writer? Well, I was a heroin addict, Kelly. I was never giving blowjobs in alleys. But no, I never thought I'd be a mystery writer. So when you were addicted to meth, and you had that monkey on your shoulder, and you were in prison giving blowjobs to prison guards, did you ever think that you'd win the Edgar? I was never in prison. I was a heroin addict, not meth. And again, not giving blowjobs to anyone. I mean, she was like, but again, it's like, she had a dark side, and Kelly Lang just could not stop harping on that dark side in those questions. And then we jump forward later to another conference, another panel where I'm sitting next to Barbara Saranella and Kelly Lang, and Barbara's grinning at the audience, but she leans over to me and she says, if that bitch calls me a crack whore again, just warning you, Lee, I'm going to grab the microphone, jump over your body, and beat her to death with it.
And it's funny because when I met Barbara,
I was a crack whore earlier in life, but that's what makes me so jovial now, is I'm trying to deal with that pain. Actually, I did have an addiction. I was addicted. I don't often mention this, but since we're all among friends here, I was addicted to neosynephrine. You remember neosynephrine? It was a decongestant that came in this little round bottle. And this is a true story. I took it so often that I couldn't breathe without it. And the doctor finally said to me, you have to stop taking neosynephrine. And I actually went through withdrawal. I mean, it was like I was shaking and I couldn't breathe, and rivers of mucus rolling down my face. That was the monkey on my back. Neosynephrine. I don't even think they sell it anymore, perhaps because of its addictive qualities. Daniel just came back on. I mentioned neosynephrine addiction, and that was crossing a line for Boswell Books.
Now
we've got in our store and talk about your sick neosynephrine addiction, you scumbag from Hollywood.
It's
right?
just one flaw too many.
Yes.
In a flawless human being.
So crack whores, meth, doing coke, that's all fine. That nasal stuff's out.
That's out.
Well, and hopefully we can do this next year in person.
Well, I have the third Eve Ronin novel, Gated Prey, is coming out in October of 2021. It's already written and finished. And I really hope I do get out there because I love Milwaukee. I love visiting Boswell's. I love the pizza next door. It's always a lot of fun to go there. And I really miss that I'm not there right now.
Worst case scenario, I'm going to find a way to send you pizza.
Oh, there you go. It's really good pizza, those of you who live in Milwaukee. You got to go next door for the pizza if you're at Boswell's. And Boswell's is a fantastic independent bookstore. I'm not joking when I say I'm spending more money there than I'm making from royalties on the books, which is a big failing for an author on a book tour. I find in every city I'm going to on a book tour, I end up having to mail books back to myself because I can't stuff them in my suitcase.
Well, in the last year, shopping with Boswell's been pretty easy because they've got great curbside pickup, and they are open for limited hours now. Ruth and I went in there not too long ago and blew a little bit of money.
Yeah.
And they will not let you leave the store. In fact, I think it's in the city code. They will not let you leave the store unless you buy a signed Nick Petrie book. They will physically block the doorway if you won't unless you buy one of those books. It's a hard sell. Sometimes it gets violent, but actually you won't be disappointed because Nick's books are terrific.
Yeah. Well, we're speechless from that. But Karen, by the way, wanted to say thank you so much. I loved Lost Hills. Looking forward to the new book because this was the best author talk ever.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I didn't even get around to singing my favorite TV themes, which is a big part of my book talks usually.
We'll save that for October.
Okay.
All right. John, Lee, thank you so much for a great evening.
My pleasure.
really,
Anytime
So
you need someone to
enjoyed the
interview me,
series.
the answer will always be yes.
And thank all of you for attending. I really appreciate you coming. And if you didn't ask questions, I'm glad you gave me some of your time tonight. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoy Bone Canyon. And let me know what you think of the book. If you do buy it and read it, I'm easy to find. Lee@leegoldberg.com is my email address. LeeGoldberg.com is my website. And you can also find me on Facebook and Twitter at Lee Goldberg. Just don't confuse me with that New York weatherman and complain to me about the forecasts, which I get daily.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you both.
Thank you.
Wonderful evening. And looking forward to more. Thank you, John, as always. Your knowledge of the mystery world is unparalleled. So, and your knowledge, except by Lee's, actually. So,
I have
you
no
can fight
knowledge.
to the
I make it
finish.
all up. I haven't met anybody. I never met Diane Wesley.
Well, this is fun. I finally broke the Zoom cherry.
Yeah.
I'm
right,
glad I was
say
able to
goodnight,
break the
everybody.
cherry, John, after all these years.
Good night, all.
Good night.